Before we get started, I want to share something with you. A few weeks ago, we printed these books, a survey of the New Testament, and we placed some of them out in the, I always come in this way, I guess that's the front, and out on this side. And this survey comes from a lesson that Brother Clarence did back in January. And there were a lot of people who asked him if they could have the notes from that sermon. And so we decided to take those notes, and actually, he rewrote the notes, took a whole legal pad and rewrote those notes by hand, and Carrie typed them, and we had those printed into this book so that each family here could have a copy of that. We wanted to do that to honor Brother Clarence and all the work that he's done in the Lord's kingdom over all these years. It's been a little over 20 years you've been preaching, hasn't it, brother? Over 70 years in the Lord's service. And so it's a simple thing, but it's a survey of the whole New Testament and a lesson that he gave in one night. And so if you didn't get one of those, we've got some out here, and we've got a few that we need to put out. We'll probably print a few more, and so that everybody can have one of those. But I just want to say how very appreciative we are of Brother Clarence for coming to work with us here at Sycamore. He is a wealth of knowledge, a wonderful mentor, a wonderful source for all of us from his teaching and his preaching and all of the work that he's done over the years. So I wanted to make sure everybody knew about those and could have those and get one if they wanted. When we run out, we'll make some more, and we'll make sure that everybody gets that. I've been here long enough now for you all to know that sometimes I don't think ahead too far. I told the college kids this morning that I was going to have some lessons geared toward them. Looked very forward to that. And I found out they weren't going to be here. Probably should have checked that first, maybe. But, so what we're going to do tonight, we want to do change things up just a little bit, and we'll start that in 2 weeks. Next week we'll be singing, having a prayer service and singing at night, Sunday night. But there are things that I know that I would want my children, if I send them off to college, to at least be reminded of. And so we want to have a couple of lessons, 3 lessons on that, and some of those things. So we'll do that. I'll check ahead, make sure they're going to be here. I could give it to you guys who are here, and you could share it with them, but that'd put a lot of pressure on you, so I'll wait. I want to share a lesson with you tonight basically on contentment. You ever wondered why, and some of you may not even have ever seen this, but you ever wonder why we don't whittle anymore? When I started working for the state of Tennessee in 1988, one of the first places they sent me to was Clay County. I went into Clay County, and there was a little bitty square box of a courthouse there, and outside the courthouse was a little wall, and every day you would go in, there would be men sitting on that wall. I went into the Register of Deeds office one morning, and the Register of Deeds was... at that time was Ray Frog. I walked in, and there were men sitting all around that office. I walked in, and I asked for Mr. Frog. And they said, well, he's not in here. He's out there. So I had to go out there, and about ankle deep, all over that patio out in there, was cedar shavings. That's where the politicians stayed, because that's where the votes were. The older men were gathered in the registrar's office because that's where the air conditioner was. And so I guess we trusted them enough to watch the money. And everywhere I went, of course, we live in a rural area, and about everywhere I went, around any courthouse you would go near, you'd see a pile of cedar shavings on the way in. I can remember sitting with my grandfather and him teaching me how to whittle. I never did it just right. My grandmother used to whittle backwards. You ever seen a lady put that cedar against her stomach and pull that knife backwards? Every time I tried that, she yelled at me. Don't do that, you'll cut yourself. I said, well, why are you doing that? And then I'd get in trouble. But my grandfathers on both sides were men who worked hard. But what really impressed me about them was that, they were able, when they finished work, they would come home and they would work, do whatever they had to do at the house, and then they'd sit down. They'd be sitting in the shade, or they would be resting from what they were doing. I was sitting there this morning, we were singing. And I was sitting there, and I caught myself, I was doing this while we were singing. And I looked down, I actually watched myself do this for a minute. And I actually kind of got a little bit of a tear in my eye. That happens to me more often these days. That's how my grandfather used to sit. That's what he would do. When he didn't have anything else to do and he was not worried about anything else and had nothing else on his mind, as far as you knew. Just be content. The workday's over. Everybody's where they're supposed to be. We live in a world of discontent. We live in a world where people are always in a hurry. Have you ever noticed that everybody's always in a hurry, but they never get anywhere? And we've got all of these things to make our lives save time, but we never seem to have any time. And we're so rushed in trying to do all these different things, and we fret over so many things. We're always wanting something more or seeking something that we don't have, and we're living for tomorrow. We're living for tomorrow, and then we complain about where the time goes. There's a poem I found several years back. It's called Present Tense. It says, it was spring, but it was summer I wanted, the warm days and the great outdoors. It was summer, but it was fall I wanted, the colorful leaves and the cool, dry air. It was fall, but it was winter I wanted, the beautiful snow and the joy of the holiday season. It was winter, but it was spring I wanted, the warmth and the blossoming of nature. I was a child, but it was adulthood I wanted, the freedom and the respect. I was 20, but it was 30 I wanted, to be mature and sophisticated. I was middle-aged, but it was 20 I wanted, the youth and the free spirit. I was retired, but it was middle age I wanted, the presence of mind without limitations. My life was over, and I never got what I wanted. I read that, and it's kind of a sad state, isn't it? When we think about that, and we think about just how fretful we sometimes are, and how fast things go and seem to never be able to slow them down. Discontentment brings a lot of things into our lives. It brings complaining and blaming and envy and ultimately regret. But one of the worst things about discontent is that it perpetuates itself. Back in the 70s, there was a song, a popular song, titled "The Cat's in the Cradle." Harry Chapin. It was about a man who didn't have time for his children. A man who didn't have time to slow down from what he was trying to do and trying to be to spend time with his kids. My son turned 10 just the other day. He said, "Thanks for the ball, Dad. Come on, let's play. Can you teach me to throw?" I said, "Not today. I got a lot to do." He said, "That's okay." And as he walked away, he said, "I'm going to be like him." And then the song ends with, "I've long since retired and my son's moved away." Called him up just the other day. Said, "I'd love to see you if you don't mind." He said, "I'd love to, Dad, if I could find the time." It's pretty sad stuff when you think about it. When I hung up the phone, it occurred to me, my boy was just like me. Discontentment is contagious. It perpetuates itself. So tonight, for just a few minutes, let's take a little bit of time to think about some keys to help us to be content. You know, I think that's one of the things that the world itself needs. I know it's something that I need to pay attention to in my life. It's scriptures teach us to be content, to be at peace. First key to contentment is an old cliche, I guess, but it's bloom where you're planted. You know, every one of us have talents. We have abilities, and we can use those talents and abilities. And instead of worrying so much about things that we don't have or things that we can't do, maybe we ought to focus our attention on the things that we can do and utilize those things. You know, T. Pierce Brown, a man who used to be an elder here, he preached, he wrote, he taught, he did so many things, but he used to say a lot, "Do what you can where you are with what you have." And I thought, man, that's brilliant, till I found out he stole that from Teddy Roosevelt years ago. But he used it properly, and he helped a lot of people simply by remembering that to be the truth. Do what you can where you are with what you have. You know, we need to use others as inspiration to always improve, but we don't need to let envy guide us. We don't need to look at other people and simply see them in an envious way. We all have talents. We all have abilities. We all have things that we can do and share, and we just need to bloom where we're planted. God gave us those abilities. If we look over in the book of 1 Corinthians, 1 Corinthians chapter 12, we read there in verse 11, "But one and the same Spirit works all these things, distributing to each one individually as He wills." The first 10 verses there talk about how there are diversities of gifts. There are different things that the Spirit has given to us. Now, at that particular time, there were miraculous gifts, but there were also simple talents and abilities that had been given to people, just like they're given today. The things that we've been given by God, and He expects us to use those things. In verse 18, He says, "But now God has set the members, each one of them, in the body, just as He pleased." God has given us talents and abilities that He expects us to utilize. You know, what you are is God's gift to you, but what you do with it is your gift to God. And we're going to be accountable for those things which we've been given. You know, it's a waste of time and talent to spend our lives wishing for that which we don't have. This is about the time I would use an illustration of hair, but I'm not going to do that tonight. But how many times do we wish for those things that we don't have and can't? So cultivate the things that we do have. Which of you by worrying can add 1 cubit to his stature? Matthew chapter 6, verse 27. Bloom where you're planted. Secondly, be ambitious, but keep it under control. You know, I think the Lord wants us to be ambitious. I believe the Scriptures support that because we are to do all that we do in the name of the Lord. We're to do all that we do to the best of our ability. Colossians chapter 3, verses 17, verse 23. We're children of God, and we represent Him in everything we do. We ought to do our best at whatever it is we're doing. We ought to be our best at whatever we're doing. We need to grow in those talents and abilities. But we need to keep it under control and not let ambition run away with us. Over in the book of Luke, in Luke chapter 12, Jesus addresses ambition that is misguided. Beginning there in verse 13, then one from the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Man, who made me a judge or an arbitrator over you?" Verse 15, he said to them, "Take heed and beware of covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of the things he possesses." You know, we work to gain, we work to create a level of comfort for our families and to provide for them. We need to keep those things under control and keep them where they ought to be. If you go on down then in verse 16, he spoke a parable to them about the rich man whose farm yielded plentifully. He had all that he needed. He had so much that he tore down his old barns and he built bigger barns. You know, the problem that he had wasn't being rich. The problem he had was the misplaced priorities. The problem he has in verse 19 when he said, "Soul, you have many goods laid up for many years. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. I've made it." And God said to him in verse 20, "Fool, this night your soul will be required of you. Then whose will these things be which you have provided?" Ambition is good. Getting better at what you do is good. Climbing whatever ladder that's in front of you, that's good, as long as we keep it in priority. As long as we keep it in the proper perspective. As long as we keep it under control. It takes our contentment away when we lose focus on stuff. Third of all, I've been trying to share this with not only during lessons from time to time, but at work. And people look at me so funny. But a key to contentment is do one thing at a time and take pride in it. Multitasking. If I were to ask you right now, how many of you are good multitaskers? We'd have people raising their hand all over this building. You know why? Because that's what we're taught to do. You got to multitask. You got to do this. You got to be super this and super that. You got to do 14 things at one time. You can only do one thing at a time and do it right. You can start a lot of stuff. You should see that at work when I say that. You know, people trying to impress folks. I can do a lot of things. No, you can't. Just do one thing. And when you finish that thing, do another thing. But focus on what you're doing and take pride in what you do. It's okay not to be a multitasker. They don't exist. At least not in the way that we feel like or it is presented to us today. One day at a time, one thing at a time. Ecclesiastes 9 and verse 10 says, whatsoever your hand finds to do, do it with your might. Back in Colossians chapter 3, everything you do it with your might. Do it as best you can, as to the Lord and not to men. I want to recommend that you do this. I don't like social media, but sometimes YouTube is handy. I don't know if that's social media or not. If it is, forgive me. But there's a video out there of a commencement speech given to the University of Texas in 2014 by a man by Admiral William McRaven. And maybe you've heard this, but I would recommend to listen to the Admiral. He was a Navy SEAL for years and years. And his commencement speech that day was entitled, How to Change the World, or If You Want to Change the World. And he gave 10 things that you ought to do if you want to change the world. I just want to share with you the first one. If you want to change the world, make your bed. He even wrote a book entitled, Make Your Bed. Now, maybe some of you are like me. My mama used to tell me make your bed, make your bed. And my answer was very logical and very intelligent. I said, why? I'm just going to get back in it tonight. She didn't accept that then. But the Admiral said, make your bed. You might think, well, what? Here's a Navy SEAL standing. He's going to tell me how to change the world. And he tells me to make my bed. Here was the logic. If you get up, the first thing you do in the morning is make your bed, you will have accomplished something. You will have accomplished the first task of the day. And each task accomplished leads to the next task accomplished. You will have a sense of fulfillment and you will have a sense of accomplishment that will carry you to whatever next task there is. Making your bed will also teach you the principle of little things matter. Little things matter. Because everything starts out as a little thing. He went on to say this. It'll help you have a great day, but you put accomplishment on accomplishment. But if you have a lousy day, when you get home, at least your bed will be made. When he finished that point, I was hooked for the next however long it took. I was listening to every word he said. Sometimes we get caught up in we have to accomplish something huge every day. And if we don't accomplish that huge thing, we feel like the day's been wasted. Think about it. Make your bed. That's number one. Then you can just add to your day after that. Do one thing at a time and take pride in it. Don't do it in a rush. Do it right. Fourth of all, learn to honestly separate needs from wants. Sorry about that. A great weapon of Satan is blurring our vision between what we need and what we want. And the truth is, 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 8 says this, "And having food and clothing, with these we shall be content." I'm going to make an announcement. And if you don't hear anything else, hear this. In this life, our true needs are very few. We don't need much. We want a lot. We don't need much. How big a house do we need? How many shoes do we need? How many cars do we need? God knows what we need. God knows what we need, and He provides us what we need. Back in Luke chapter 12 again, we see there in verse 22, "Then He said to His disciples, 'Therefore I say to you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat, nor about the body, what you will put on. Life is more than food, and the body is more than clothing. Consider the ravens, for they neither sow nor reap, which have neither storehouse nor barn, and God feeds them. Of how much more value are you than the birds?'" God knows what we need. Life is more than food, the body more than clothing. There are things that are very important. And we don't need to fret over those things. He says in verse 29, "Do not seek what you should eat or what you should drink, nor have anxious mind. For all these things the nations of the world seek after, and your Father knows that you need these things. But seek the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added to you." Scripture teaches us if we will work, we will eat. If we will mind the things that are important, we take care of the needs, then those are the things that are important in our lives. We need to learn to honestly separate needs from wants. My son, Bo, played college baseball. And he was off at college, and every day I would check to see how he did today. I'd check to see how his statistics were going. I would check to see how they were playing, how they were winning. For 3 years, I could tell you how many hits, how many home runs. I could tell you how many times he did this, how many times he did that. But one day it dawned on me, I wasn't even really sure what he was majoring in. I don't think I ever called him one time and said, "How's your grades?" or "How are your classes going?" You see, in my mind, there's my problem. We needed to do well so that we could make that ultimate goal of professional baseball. You know, our goal, which turned out to be mine because I didn't bother to ask what his was. What he needed was an education, which, by the way, he got. And with that education, he went to work, and he's a productive citizen today. But I don't remember a lot of the statistics. And even if I did, what difference would they make now? Separate needs from wants. Separate the things that are important from the things that are just fun. And then finally, lastly, and actually firstly, strive for godliness. You see, godliness and contentment are companions. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 6 and 7. Godliness and contentment go together. The more we strive to be closer to God, the more we understand that God is taking care of us. Growing closer to God takes effort. It also keeps us from focusing on all of this other stuff that's not important. A clearer understanding of priorities brings us comfort. And a conscience clear from sin and its consequences allows us to enjoy life as Christians. Hebrews chapter 13, beginning in verse 5, says this: "Let your conduct be without covetousness. Be content with such things as you have, for he himself has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. So we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper. I will not fear. What can man do to me?" You know, contentment's not natural to everybody. As a matter of fact, I don't know that it's natural to many people. It's learned. In Philippians chapter 4 and verse 12 was read to us a few minutes ago. I know, Paul said, how to be abased, and I know how to abound. I've had a lot and I've had a little, and I know how to function each way. He says, everywhere and in all things, I have learned both to be full and to be hungry, to abound and to suffer need. It's something that we learn. It's something that if we put our minds to, we can do. With Jesus, we can achieve contentment. Philippians 4:13, I can do all things, including being content through Christ who strengthens me. You know, maybe we need to learn, teach ourselves how to slow down just a little bit. Maybe we all need to find us a good pocket knife and a cedar tree. Learn how to whittle again. It's useless. It's useless. Unless you got a hamster or you just want to put some shavings in the closet, whittling's useless. But it is a sign of contentment. It's a sign of knowing how to take a break, to rest, till it's time to go to work again. Now, don't misunderstand. A lot of folks spend their whole day whittling. That's wrong too. But contentment is something that we need to pay attention to. It's something we need to develop in our lives. It will help all of us. And if we don't, our life will soon be over, and we will have never gotten what we wanted. You know, the Word of God touches every aspect of our lives, including the way that we approach each and every day. Are you content? Is contentment a part of your life? It should be. Because while we're striving to go, you know, contentment doesn't eliminate evangelism. Contentment doesn't eliminate benevolence. Contentment doesn't eliminate teaching and preaching and reaching out. But when we go and we reach out and we share what we have, is the world seeing us? Is the world seeing us as the Scriptures describe us? Is contentment a part of our lives? Does God come first? Tonight I want to offer the invitation again of the Lord and simply ask, where do you stand with God today? What a wonderful God we serve, who allows us, offers us pardon, as we talked about this morning, but allows us second chances, allows us to return to Him when we fail, allows us peace, allows us comfort through His Word. This afternoon, are you a child of God? Are you a faithful child of God? If not, if there's something we can do to assist you this eevening, won't you make your needs known as together we stand, we sing.